Going down swinging acutely meant rummaging around in poor lighting for the next 6 to 10 hours trying to find his way through the cave. He had nothing in the way of food or water as Flean's group had clearly ransacked his pack and left him for dead. This left him extremely hungry in addition to lost and confused. It also meant he had no light. He unfortunately had to stick relatively close to the walls or it quickly risked getting dark enough he couldn't see more than a few feet in front of his face. This limited his movement pretty severely, but he couldn't very well risk walking around in the pitch black. Not only were there plenty of things to eat him, but if he was being honest, it was just plain scary. Eventually, he found what he assumed was the primary road. Fortunately, it had signs pointing towards the nearest settlement. He mentally noted the general direction in case the road changed. Even better, the road was partially lit, which was a blessing, but also presented an entirely new danger: enemy combatants. He didn't know how long he'd been out, but clearly multiple groups had caught up to Flean's foray. The first time he'd had to jump off the main road and hide is when he heard a series of noises in the distance that ended up being a party of crab-like creatures that skittered past him without noticing. Each creature held the remains of something in one of its 4 claws, and all of them looked intensely carnivorous. He had been too scared to scan them, but it wasn't a stretch to assume they would gladly eat him. He realized quickly the main roads were probably more dangerous than the edges, and decided to split the difference when possible. When he got the courage back up, he started back towards the settlement he had marked. Man-eating crabs or not, he was going to get to this town and at least have a moment to figure his shit out before he gave this whole thing up and jumped into the deepest, darkest pit he could find. Boyd stepped briskly into the cave and with his next step, landed in what he believed to be quicksand. He vigorously shook his shoe over and over again only to find that this led to that leg going lower and lower into the dirt. Almost simultaneously, his leg suddenly began to hurt. Life 109 of 111. You were bit by a dirt weevil. You are incubating dirt weevils. Life 108 111. You were bit by a dirt weevil. You are incubating 2 dirt weevils. Life 107 111. You were bit by a dirt weevil. You are incubating 3 dirt weevils. Boyd had no idea what incubating dirt weevils was, but it sounded bad. The sinking into the ground was rapidly becoming the bigger issue though, as it was stretching his body in extremely uncomfortable ways. He wiggled and shook, but it only led to him sinking lower. He grabbed a nearby rock formation protruding from the ground and started to pull himself out, but it was like pulling against barbed wire. He winced through the pain as he pulled his leg out of the mixture of weevils and sand, only to find that while the sand was gone, the weevils were stuck. Life 90/111. Dirt weevils have exploded from your leg. Life 82 of 111. Dirt weevils have exploded from your leg. Life 71 of 111. Dirt weevils have exploded from your leg. Life 66 of 111. You were bit by a dirt weevil. You are incubating 1 dirt weevils. Life 64 of 111. You were bit by a dirt weevil. You are incubating 2 dirt weevils. He began slapping dirt weevils off his leg with his hands. The dirt weevils exploded into gory bits of bug goo as he slapped them. Boyd hit his mana tap ability and vaulted back to full life when all the bugs were gone. System: extensive use of the mana tap ability has given you an additional rank in mana tap. You can assign this in your monk unassigned character sheet. Boyd scanned the swirling sand of the cavern, hoping to get a bead on what made the dirt weevils tick. This all registered in Boyd's brain in an instant, but it didn't put him any closer to determining what to do next. In fact, it mostly led to a state of outright panic wherein he started frantically smashing weevils as fast as he could. Faster than he could slap them, one would bite him and a few seconds later, a new one would pop out. It was like the world's most rapidly developing case of some sort of pox. His life pool was plummeting, so he slammed mana tap again, but despite his incredible mana regeneration, this barely moved his life pool. He continued frantically slapping dirt weevils as he could, but the hole in the ground kept spitting them out. Life 36 of 111. You were bit by a dirt weevil. You are incubating 7 dirt weevils. Boyd was rapidly running out of ideas and options. Slapping weevils wasn't going to solve this for him, so he went to his next best move, running away. He sprinted back towards the main road, desperately hoping to find some sort of help. The swirling sandy hole in the ground followed, but it moved surprisingly fast for what appeared to be a pile of shifting sands. He quickly realized that both dirt weevils and a ground dirt weevil coagulate are faster than a human male with poor attributes who never made the track team to begin with. He turned and spun, ready to face his fate. A voice shouted, "Cascading Inferno!" Pillars of bubbling liquid appeared around the swirling sand. They quickly turned from liquid to steam before erupting into ceiling-height pillars of fire that fell back to the ground, splashing the nearby areas in puddles of flaming liquid. Boyd was singed by some of the liquid. He swatted it off his skin as it burned through his clothes. Life 22 of 111. You are lightly burning. You take 4 damage per minute until you are quenched. He tried to mana tap. Mana 0 of 68. Oh well, he thought. Exploding into a pillar of flame was faster than being eaten by bugs. He turned to face the new assailant only to find he couldn't make out any substantial threat. System, rock rot hits you for 5 damage. Rock rot cannot be cured without essence of earth. Great, he thought, rock rot on top of all this. Boyd was burned and bleeding from his legs. He could barely stand as his legs were all but destroyed from the dirt weevils. Hello? Look, I ain't here for a fight. You let me go, I'll let you go. The false bravado was obvious, but he thought it was better than just rolling over to die. A bubbling voice called out, "I am afraid we cannot do that." From the shadows appeared 5 differently colored steaming shapes that Boyd finally related most closely to partially cooled Jell-O. They steamed and smoked, yet clearly had some sort of substance. Pools of liquid followed them wherever they walked. They were modestly human in shape, although far too lithe, and far too tall. Boyd placed himself in a combat stance, desperate to portray some sort of competency. He scanned his opposition. System, Fermentation Elemental, rank 186. This is a non-friendly non-party combatant and cannot be scanned. The largest figure, maroon and with a beard made of bubbling steam, laughed heartily as he came forward. We simply cannot leave a fellow adventurer this close to life-ending peril. At least allow my colleague Rosie to heal your wounds, good sir. Boyd was going to protest, but a smaller pink glowing ball of liquid steam and vanilla custard-looking material had already flittered over and began healing his wounds. Allow me to introduce us, I am Merlot, the leader of the other steamy custard creatures. All started a drum roll, Merlot's Merrymen. Allow us to introduce the rest of my merry cadre. First, we have my brother, Sir Pinot. The slightly smaller purple steamy custard thing doffed what appeared to be a removable cap and bowed deeply. Not knowing what to do, Boyd stuck his hand out to shake. The creature laughed and placed its moist hand in Boyd's and gave a heart pump. Boyd's hand was wet on return. Next, we have my dear friends, the twins Rosie and Sarah. The twins both had wings, and looked like Merlot himself, but were smaller, pinker balls of steamy custard with arms and legs and more feminine faces. The smaller of the 2 pink balls of glowing liquid danced a merry jig with a nearly identical but slightly bluer version of herself before they both bowed before Boyd. He smiled and bowed in return. And finally, my dear friend Sir Donore the Chartreuse, although we typically just refer to him as Chard. The yellow ball of custard-like material whipped out a makeshift piccolo and played a merry little tune while the rest of the crew danced a jig. Yellow sparks shot out the top of his head as he played. The tune was almost like listening to butter melt. It was magical, and filled Boyd with energy and hope. Merlot continued, we are adventurers. Merrymakers. Lovers of discourse and food and fellowship. We are wizards and bards and warrior. We are musicians and poets and actor. And, our new dear friend Boyd, we are at your service. Boyd started clapping instinctively. He wasn't sure what else to do. It had been quite the performance. They made camp after a short walk. Merlot started a fire with a snap of a finger. Somehow it kept burning, despite the fact it didn't have any fuel. Boyd didn't care. He needed rest, and he was happy to have someone to rely on while he slept. More importantly, he had someone to lead him to town. His brief experience with ground dirt Weevil conglomerates led him to believe he needn't be prepared for a long life if he was on his own. Merlot's Merrymen prepared a small feast that Boyd thought was amongst the most delicious things he had ever eaten. They also had meat and wine, and he ended up quite drunk and very full. It was probably the most fun he'd had since being space kidnapped and nearly killed several times. This was a very low bar, but it was still nice to pass all the same. Realistically, it was the only fun he'd had during this period, and the first time he felt like someone wasn't actively trying to do him harm. Merlot's Merrymen asked him about this story, and he gave the simplest version of things after they found every other version hard to follow. He did remember to leave out the whole inheritabilities thing as Flean had told him. He left out Flean's name entirely as he wasn't really ready to talk about his recent ouster to begin with. He just said the group had decided they didn't want him and had avoided any questions after that. Chard poured a large glass of meat into his form where it sort of stuck. So you never meant to come here, you have no idea where you are, your foray abandoned you, your sword bond is broken, and you have no idea where you are. My dear boy, I have no idea how you've even made it this far. You poor, poor thing. Rosie and Sarah said while rubbing his back. They left small circular piles of goop on his favorite t-shirt, which he didn't appreciate. Boyd hiccuped, yeah, so I guess I am just gonna sort of meander about until I figure out what the hell I need to do to get back to Oklahoma. Y'all got any ideas? Pino stopped playing his custard lute, ending the dulcet tones that had filled the camp. Transposition is amongst the complicated magics. Our culture only recently learned it. While we are capable of transposing our own kind, we would struggle to work with your form. My suggestion is that you find other humans and consult with them. Earth don't have any magic, man. We don't do transposition. Chard interjected, then I would find a way to spend the next 30 years happily on Zenith. Then be prepared to be the first person in history to be present during the 30-year switch. Boyd looked down. He hadn't thought about that. What if he never got back? Merlot's Merrymen began playing their instruments again. Merlot smiled at Boyd, Sir Boyd, for tonight, your only concern is enjoying food, drink, and music. You are our guest. Boyd belched and the group laughed. He was quite drunk, and quite happy with the music. They didn't know any Skinnerd covers, but he did enjoy what they had to play. Before he went to sleep, Boyd investigated the change in mana tap. He had been using it frequently as incidental damage occurred frequently in Zenith. He didn't know what a new mark did, but he thought it could only help. Mana tap was a lifesaver and was also the only use he had found for his considerable mana reserves and mana regeneration. Boyd clicked on the initial message in his character sheet. System, extensive use of the mana tap ability has given you an additional mark in mana tap. You can assign this in your monk, unassigned, character sheet. Mana tap Mark II acquired. 10% increased life regained per mana spent. Mana tap Mark II acquired, you may select one of two upgrades. Regeneration, whenever you use mana tap, you heal for an additional amount equal to the total amount of health gained through mana tap over the next 30 seconds. Triage, life gained through mana tap can triage dangerous wounds at 50% higher cost. This includes wounds that would not heal naturally through mana tap, such as broken bones or mortal wounds. Boyd thought about it for a minute. He frequently had to use all of his mana to heal himself. He had almost no armor and routinely took large amounts of damage. Having regeneration would be nice in that he wouldn't be so dependent on hitting mana tap reflexively. On the other hand, having a broken bone sounded pretty bad, and without any healer around to help him now, he probably needed a way to fix things like this. Triage seemed like the best choice in this light. He mentally clicked triage, but had immediate buyer's remorse. He tried to switch his pick, but quickly realized it wasn't going to be possible after it was confirmed. He fell asleep with the thought it wouldn't likely matter as he would probably die in the next 24 hours regardless. They had broke camp and were now moving forward through the vast caverns and narrow dusty tunnels that marked the current level. We're here for the same thing everyone else is. Our society uses mana for many critical tasks. While we don't have the pedigree of some of the larger groups, this is our competition too, and we aim to excel past our previous excellent standards. Boyd was confused. This is your second attempt? I thought it was only once every 30 years? It is, but 30 years is a relatively short time for us. Some races live days, some live months, we typically live centuries. Our view of time is different than yours, but the long and short of it is that assuming we all leave here alive, we will continue to serve our society for many forays to come. There is nothing quite as valuable as experience, Sir Boyd. Merlot winked at him and ran his finger-like appendages through his long, greasy beard. That makes sense, I guess, so you guys know all about this place, huh? Pino laughed. While no one knows everything, many of the more prominent groups have centuries of experience. The Cold Iron Dwarves are said to have mapped the entirety of the maze for more than 100 levels. It is, of course, no surprise that they always fare well in this contest. I am supposed to find a town though, so maybe if y'all happen to know where the closest town is? I don't need to know everything, just need to find a town to get back on my feet. Merlot nodded. Most certainly, while we have a quest to complete prior to arriving at the closest town, you are welcome to join us until then. Due to your compromised state, we won't ask you to participate in combat with us, but you may simply follow along for safety until you are back on your feet. That's good enough for me. Thank you kindly. A magnificent light appeared above Chard's head and proceeded to persistently light the way down the cavern, easily outshining the bits of light that came in. Then follow my little helper and we will be off. They stopped in front of a set of cliffs that extended into the cave wall. The nearby cliffs were buzzing with activity that Boyd couldn't make out. High atop the cliffs was a massive, glowing blue stone that Boyd recognized as a mana node. An extremely large exclamation point shone above the cliffs in a brilliant color of yellow. Boyd was fixated on it. This is where our paths must diverge for a while, Sir Boyd. If you simply continue along this road, you will find the town of Caveswall though. Perhaps we will see you there. Yeah, perhaps. Hey, what's that thing over there? Boyd asked. Ah, you have spotted our quest. We are in the process of assembling a powerful item for our healers Rosie and Sarah. It requires feathers from the Harpy King, an incredibly dangerous foe that rests at the top of the Cliffs of Agony. I'm guessing those are the Cliffs of Agony then? Boyd pointed towards the expanse of cliffs in front of them. Water fell over the cliff edges from an impossibly high source somewhere beyond his vision. The rocks glistened, having been flattened under the constant pressure from the water. They cliffs beautiful and enticing. He felt pulled to them immediately, but realized this quest was not his own. Even more problematically, the cliffs were exceptionally well lit, and upon them he noticed a number of potential issues. The cliff path itself looked extremely treacherous, but perhaps more problematically, some of the aforementioned activity was due to the presence of giant birds that looked mostly like large red eagles, but were substantially larger. He focused on the bird as best he could to scan it. System, rock, rank 45. There are many different types of rock in the world. Rocks are fairly common and mostly non-threatening. They struggle to get off the ground and can't carry much weight very far, and thus prefer higher altitude homes such as mountains. Really, the only way a rock becomes dangerous is if they can somehow pick you up and drop you from a great height. As long as you don't encounter one on, say, a set of cliffs, you should be fine. Oh wait. Even Boyd quickly realized the whole Cliffs of Agony were a setup for the birds to knock you off the ledge. If y'all had a way to make yourself really heavy, you could walk right past them. Indeed, Sir Boyd. We use this exact strategy. I can cast a spell called Iron Toes that makes our feet shod in iron. It does make walking a bit more difficult, but the spikes allow us to dig into the cliff walls and protect us from the rocks. This is not the danger of the Cliffs of Agony though, only an additional inconvenience. Pino pointed high on the cliffs. Those are the actual issue. Here, use my telescope, it will still allow scanning. Pino handed Boyd an item which he scanned instinctively. He was starting to get the hang of Zenith. System, telescope of far scanning, a magically enhanced telescope that allows for system scans at great distances. Property of Pino, of Merlot's Merrymakers. Boyd focused it as high as he could on the cliffs. The telescope kept trying to scan random things of less interest, and he had to unfocus it multiple times, pulling his face back from the lens. Eventually, he got a good bead on one of the creatures in question and scanned it. It was part bird and part woman, sort of like Salia, but whereas she was tiny and mostly bird-like with mammalian hands, this thing was basically a human-esque female with wings, feathers, and claws for feet. System, Angry Harpy, rank 42. Angry Harpy is a bit of an oxymoron. They are a cranky bunch. Like their cousins the Sirens, they spend most of their days luring people onto their cliffs with their harpy song. No one knows why, but it seems like their only real enjoyment in life is convincing nearby travelers to do whatever it is they want, which is typically jump off a nearby ledge. Did I mention all harpies are carnivores? And they rarely go hungry. It was coming together pretty fast for him. So you plug your ears and then put on Ironfoot Thingers and then can walk right up to the king, right? It seems like the whole point of this place is to get past these trap creatures. Shard and Rosie nodded. Trap creatures. We'd never thought of it this way. Brilliant, we love it. It's a classic mission for a rogue, and thus Chard will primarily complete this one for us. He will sneak past the harpies, fight off the rocks, and then ultimately be forced to do battle with the Harpy King. He can then tap the mana nodes and pluck the feathers and we'll be off. We can support him from down here, but we cannot go on the ledge itself. Why not? Boyd asked. Too dangerous. You'll see, Chard said. Merlot began casting a spell. Chard's feet were rapidly encoded in a layer of pure steel. These do make the sneaking around quite a bit more difficult, I must say. I do wish we had a quieter heavy substance. The group laughed as a whole, so Boyd laughed too, but mostly out of an urge to be accepted. Welp, I'm off then. Boyd sat down and decided to watch the adventurer in action. It was Chard's third attempt up the cliffs. The first two ended the same way. He would make it 2/3 of the way up the cliff, whereupon a harpy would see him and then he would slowly walk off the edge of the cliff until Merlot or one of the other casters caught him in a bubble and set him back on the cliffs. He would have been dead a long time ago without their help. Boyd hadn't really said anything till this point. Why does he keep doing that? Boyd asked. He's gonna get himself killed. He isn't doing it on purpose. Chard is a class called a light bard. He's not truly a rogue, but he serves that purpose for our foray. While he has all of the normal bard spells, he can also bend light around him to give him a significant bonus to stealth abilities. He's basically invisible to most creatures when he wants to be, but the harpies have extremely keen vision. Whenever he is spotted, they send him off the edge. Then we catch him and set him back. Merlot said. You can do it. Rosie cheered. We got you. Sarah said. What happens if he falls? Boyd asked. The twins looked disappointed. We won't let that happen. We each have a bubble spell, so as long as he doesn't fall twice in a few seconds or so, we can catch him. Sarah said. Boyd thought for a minute. So how does the harpy thing work? Sarah and Rosie giggled. Everyone finds harpies very seductive. It's their song. It's so beautiful, you will do anything they want. They both frowned, including walk off a cliff. It's a seduction? 'Cause if so, I think I might have a better way of doing this. Why don't you let me try? The party looked at him before Merlot responded. It is a seduction, Sir Boyd, but while we are aware you are unfamiliar with the maze, but it would be considered quest poaching if you were to do this. That is antagonistic in nature. Please allow us to continue. Isn't there like a teamwork function or something? Can't we do it together? The Merrymen looked to Merlot. There is, but there is a large amount of mana and rewards attached to this quest. You would have to convince me that your way is likely to be substantially better without us losing much. As long as that harpy thing is a seduction spell, I got this. Hook me up with those metal boots, and if a rock gets at me, then fireball his ass if you can. Tell Chard to come on down. I'm tagging in. Merlot nodded and stroked his beard. Tell me your plan. The rocks weren't a big problem. Even at Boyd's much lower level and without much in the way of armor, they were mostly just big birds. He would punch and kick at them when they came by. The metal shoes that Merlot had given him made his monk kicks pretty effective against the sleight of frame birds. One kick wouldn't kill them, but it stunned them long enough for them to fall out of the air and go kersplat on the ground. Unfortunately, he wasn't receiving much experience for any of the kills as the ground was doing most of the work. System: rock dies from falling. You gain 12 experience, 15% of damage. Now that he wasn't with Flean's group, he was getting a ton more experience, which was nice. The whole thing was going quite well. He had explained the plan clearly to Merlot's Merrymen, but they were surprisingly obtuse. The idea that he couldn't be seduced just didn't seem to register. I don't understand, Sir Boyd, how can you possibly hope to resist the Harpy's song? It's a long story. The fast version is that I slung some of this here dick to some succubus lady with 4 big-ass boobs down on the Canal District whorehouse, and Boyd remembered he wasn't supposed to mention his inheritabilities. Well, she did a spell to me that made me good at avoiding seduction. On account of how I was able to please her. It was a quest. A new one. That's why y'all don't know about it. I figured it out too. You know, fellas always assume pleasing the ladies is about the size of the boat, but I really try to touch them in the one place a lady really needs to be touched, her mind, then they just fall to pieces. Rosie and Sarah shared an odd look, but Boyd couldn't quite place it. They both put their fingers in their mouth and did a fake gag at that point, and Boyd figured out the meaning. The story was complete bullshit, of course. Actually, he'd thrown away a few thousand gold in a few hours, and then woke up with a new inheritability. He had no idea how he'd gotten it, but assumed that Xena was probably behind it in one way or another. Regardless, it fit the current situation pretty well. As long as he could avoid the rocks, he could simply walk straight to the Harpy King. He had a teleportation beacon that would allow one of the party members to teleport to him. As soon as he was out of range of the song, he would simply teleport in Merlot, who would launch a quick fireball, and that would be that. Boyd was about halfway up the cliffs when he encountered the first harpy. He heard her song from a distance, but couldn't make out the words until he got closer. Rockrot hits you for 5 damage. Rockrot cannot be cured without essence of earth. He hid behind a cliff wall and stared at the harpy. He quickly realized he actually understood the song. Boyd jumped out from behind the cliff wall. Hi there, ma'am, you mind if I pass by? The harpy stopped singing. You can understand me. Yes, ma'am. No one ever understands me. They just jump off the cliff. Oh shit, wait, he's coming by, hide. The harpy cleared her throat. Jump off the cliff. If you are an adventurer and you hear this, then jump off the cliff. Please jump off the cliff. Boyd looked up and saw a slightly larger and much uglier harpy flying around the area. None of the harpies wore clothes, but they were generally covered in feathers. In contrast, this fellow was packing some serious meat which hung between his legs as he flew over the cliffs. Boyd scanned him quickly, but he knew what this was before he even bothered. Boyd pressed himself tightly against the cliffs of agony. There is no way he would have a chance against a rank 104 boss, particularly with Soul Drinker broken. That thing was certain death if it saw him. He tried to control his breathing and hide as best he could. Fortunately for him, the Harpy King was mostly interested in looking for rocks to eat, and hadn't considered the idea that adventurers might make it past his horde of screaming angry harpies. Once he was certain the Harpy King was gone, Boyd walked back up to the angry harpy. Hey, do you have a name? Jump off the cliffs, oh adventurer, jump off the cliffs. She stopped singing, he's gone for sure. Hey, why aren't you jumping? Also, how are you talking to me? Oh, I'm immune to seduction. Can most people not talk to you? That's awful sad. Bet you get lonely up here. Hey, do you have a name? Yeah, I'm Lisa. That's not what I expected you to say. Oh, well, I am Lisa all the same. She smiled and placed her wings under her chin and batted her eyelashes. Boyd found it cute. Okay, Lisa, well, the good news is that we can talk. You seem awful unhappy with this Harpy King guy. Maybe I can help a bit? Help? With my dad? The Harpy King is your dad? Well, yeah, he's the dad to most of us. Our moms are all on the top of the cliffs. Most of us just take turns sitting here singing while he flies around looking for rocks. Maybe we could help each other then. What if I got rid of him for you? What do you mean? You know, I mean like take care of him. Boyd drew his finger across his throat. You're going to kill my dad? Why do you think I would help you with that? Lisa's face turned red and she ran towards Boyd, angrily screaming and flapping her wings. A distortion in his vision appeared in his vision where her mouth was. System, you were hit by Harpy's sonic scream. You are immune to its seductive effect, but suffer 30 damage. Life 81 of 111. Boyd realized he might have overstepped his bounds a bit. He didn't have a weapon, but he could still punch and kick using his monk skills, and his shiny metal foot pads didn't hurt. The Harpy tried to slash with her claws, but she was slow and surprisingly weak. Boyd dodged it and punched her a few times. He felt instant pangs of guilt as he had been taught never to hit women. He realized his mama would be very disappointed in him for this action, regardless of the fact this creature was also part bird and very aggressive. He quickly decided that this wasn't the course of action he wanted to take and was trying to figure a way out of hitting her again when she slashed his arm. Life 57 of 111. The slash on his arm drowned out his mama's voice and reminded him this was indeed life or death. Remembering that a harpy wasn't a human woman, but rather some sort of zenith-generated death machine designed to kill him, he strayed from his monk skills and went back to his more reliable fighting style, mimicking MMA shit he'd seen on TV. He had a solid 100 pounds on the harpy, so he did what anyone with a weight advantage would do and bear hugged her when she got close again. He was strong enough to quickly get around her back and then initiate a choke hold. He expected the standard level of resistance, but the harpy's neck was more bird-like in nature. A quick choke crushed her windpipe entirely and she crumped to the ground. System, you have slain Lisa the Harpy. You gain 230 experience. You cannot assign ranks until you resolve your broken sword soul status. System, achievement unlocked, asshole, Mark 3. You know how there is that one guy who always makes right turns out of the left turn lane on a red light? Or the guy who steals someone else's drink at the coffee counter because he doesn't want to wait on his own? There is a word for those people. It's asshole. The asshole achievement has multiple marks, and it looks like you skipped at least a few of them with your recent actions. To recap, a lot of things have killed a lot of other things in history. It's an inherently violent world out there. It takes a special brand of shithead to meet something, learn its name, befriend it, and then kill it all in the same conversation though. That sort of instant betrayal gets a name. That name is asshole. Note, this achievement has up to 10 marks. Increasing marks will increase the reward. Note, receiving this achievement bars you from receiving any achievements higher than Mark 3 in the Nice Guy achievement line. You don't get experience for this one, but you do get a title. New title unlocked, kind of a prick. Boyd didn't know titles existed but saw that he could add kind of a prick to the end of his name display if he wanted. He quickly decided against this though, realizing it wasn't likely to win him any new friends. The whole encounter was a useful conversation though. He realized he just needed a mild adjustment in how he approached harpy negotiations. The voice came through like a megaphone in his ear. Boyd, this is Merlot, has your plan failed? I am speaking to you via telepathy. I can only do this for a limited time. Life 55 of 111. He didn't know how to respond, so he walked to the cliffs of Agony Edge and waved his hands with a motion he thought would mean no. Merlot's merrymakers seemed to understand. We understand, proceed. Life 54 of 111. The voice boomed in his head again. He'd end up dying of auditory damage from Merlot screaming in his ear if the Harpys didn't get him. When Boyd happened upon the next Harpy, he reinitiated almost the exact same conversation he had earlier. He took a slightly different turn at the point he ended up having to kill the last Harpy though in order to avoid a similar outcome. Wait, you can understand me? The Harpy said. Boyd held his hands out. Yes, it seems like I can. I am as surprised about this as you are. They went through the standard conversation about how and why this occurred before ending back up on the topic of her father. Do you know about my father, the Harpy King? No, I certainly don't, Boyd lied. He has imprisoned us all here. I do care for him, but I am bored to death just yelling at adventurers all day. But I just don't understand how all adventurers are bad. I just wish there was a way I could reach them. The new Harpy spun towards the edge of the cliff and clasped her claws to her chest. Look at these cliffs. Aren't they neat? Wouldn't you think my life is complete? Wouldn't you think I'm the Harpy who is everything? She hung her head before looking skyward. I've killed rocks and critters a-plenty. I've killed combatants and heroes galore. You wanna talk townspeople? I've killed 20. She giggled a bit. But who cares, no big deal. I want more. The Harpy spun in a circle towards Boyd. I wanna be where the people are. I wanna see their heads on lances. She paused. Perhaps you can help me? I might be interested in trying, Boyd said. Can I ask your name? Sure, it's Lisa. Boyd was taken aback yet again. Your name is Lisa? That's not surprising to me at all, because I didn't know what your name was. Lisa answered, yeah, almost everyone here is named Lisa actually. Dad gets to pick the names, and he only knows like 3 names. So we are all either Lisa, or Annie, or Screamy. That's our mom's names. Dad's not real bright. Boyd realized helping might be a safer means to get what he needed. What do you need me to do? System, quest accepted, help the Harpys, yay for Harpys. The angry Harpys are apparently being held captive by their dad/husband, the Harpy King. Figure out a peaceful solution to their problem and you might receive a substantial reward from the Harpy community. Not compatible with don't help the Harpys. Not compatible with matriarchy. System, quest accepted, matriarchy, yeah, he's got a big dick, but he's not good for anything else. Kill the Harpy King and free his poor wives from his oppressive reign. You might receive a very large reward from the Harpy community if you complete this quest. Not compatible with don't help the Harpys. Not compatible with help the Harpys. Boyd looked over the quest updates. It appeared like he had a choice. The best choice was obviously to help the Harpys as it offered the largest reward. That wasn't what he had agreed to with Merlot though. He needed more information. So what do you recommend I do next? Boyd asked. Dad is a nice guy, but he's dumb as a post. No one is asking you to fix the whole situation. We just need to talk some sense into him. Mom says if we can get him an intelligence potion and get him to drink it, we can get him to agree to some new rules around the place while he isn't such a dunce. Bring me back an intelligence potion and I can take care of most of the rest of it. I just need the potion. Don't poison the potion though. Quest update, help the Harpys bring Lisa 2, not the one you killed, an intelligence potion. Quest update, don't help the Harpys bring Lisa 2, not the one you killed, an intelligence potion, but poison it first. Probably don't tell her if you poison it. Quest update, matriarchy, tell Lisa's 2 mom, Lisa 3, about Lisa 2's offer. A side note, Lisa 3 is just a naming convention for your sake. Actually, Lisa's mom would be Lisa 1 and Lisa 2 would be Lisa 38. I know you struggle with big numbers, though, so I am trying to simplify things for you. This meant some significant backtracking, but he thought he should bring this to Merlot's attention. He started back down the cliffs. Do you guys have any intelligence potions then? Boyd had carefully explained the results of his little adventure to see the Harpys. Merlot's foray looked between them before Pinot spoke up. I'm not sure I follow. Why didn't you just kill the Harpy King as we planned? Well, I got all these quests, and it seems like it might be better if we did it the other way. Maybe we get some sort of reward according to my quest log. The group looked between themselves again. Sir Boyd, I am intrigued by your proposal, but I need to be clear. We are here for something very specific. I don't know if it is worth it to risk a change in reward based on a hunch. While I respect your interest in your own gain, I don't think anyone has ever tried to do things your way. If we were to go with your route, it seems we might miss out on our purpose, or miss out on the mana node array. I have to decline. Right then, Chard stood up and began casting bend light around himself to start his stealth mission. No, wait, Boyd ran ahead. Listen here, I'll get you the thing you need. You said you want the Harpy King's feathers, right? I'll get 'em for you. Chard, they saw me, they know people are around. If you go, you are gonna die. Let me do this. All I need is an intelligence potion, and I can do this. I can brew one quite easily, said Pinot. Simple recipe, just give me a few minutes. It won't be powerful, but it should satisfy the quest system. I even have the reagents handy. Deal, said Boyd. He had the potion stowed away safely in his belt inventory. It clanged around a little as he climbed, but Pinot had assured him it wouldn't cause him any troubles as the flask was magically prevented from breaking from anything short of extremely intense pressure. Likely the only thing that would leave it broken was him falling from the cliffs, whereupon it wouldn't really matter anyway. He made it back to Lisa in a few hours. He had encountered a few more rocks and had gained enough experience to increase another rank, but he got the same message as earlier. You cannot assign ranks until you resolve Broken Sword Soul. He made it past the corpse of Lisa 1. He had covered in however many stones and sticks he could find laying around to obscure the corpse, hoping to avoid any sort of alarm that might go off at the sight of a dead harpy. Since he had passed Lisa 1's corpse, that also meant that the Harpy King could be around any minute, so he started to be extra careful moving in and out of the shadows of the Cliffs of Agony. He thought he could take a single harpy, but he was sure he couldn't handle the Harpy King. After around 15 more minutes of climbing, he heard the harpy song yet again about jumping off the cliff and whatnot. He recognized Lisa 2's voice and turned the corner to see her looking just as lackluster as ever as she carelessly sung her song. Jump, jump, jump off the cliff. Oh my god, this is boring. Oh hey. You're back, did you bring it? Boyd looked toward the sky for any signs of the king, and then ran towards Lisa 2. Yeah, I got it here. What do we do with it? I'll give it to my mom. She'll know what to do. Boyd panicked for a second, he wasn't sure what would happen and didn't want the quest to fail. He'd promised Merlot he could carry it out. The matriarchy quest seemed like it had the best reward, but he was afraid it wouldn't result in the Harpy King dying. Sure, take me to your mom, he said. What about my sisters though? They shouldn't be a problem if you aren't, he said. Boyd smiled and tried to be as charismatic as possible. He knew that it affected NPC response, but wasn't sure if it was something you had to actively pursue. Boyd began climbing up an adjacent cliff wall, but Lisa 2 stopped him with a bird claw. Want a lift? Boyd thought about it. You think you can carry me? Drop the iron boots spell and I bet I can, she said. Boyd did as he was told and mentally removed the iron boots spell. Lisa 2 grabbed him gently by the shoulders and began to ascend. Boyd felt the air flow briskly by him. She couldn't carry him very quickly, but she was moving up the cliffs far faster than he could on his own. He looked up at his newfound bird-based transportation unit and for the first time, he felt some confidence. He was doing it. He was actually having some success. He felt like he might be able to live through all this craziness. Then Lisa too dropped him. She squawked angrily, and he felt himself immediately start to fall. He looked straight down and realized he had an extremely long ways to fall and no way to solve the problem. It was a dramatic change of pace, the feeling that he might have this place figured out for the first time, followed immediately by the feeling it was going to kill him. He closed his eyes and prepared for the impact. You take 102 falling damage. Life 9 of 111. She had underestimated him. He had underestimated himself for that matter. He was alive, but barely. He could feel broken bones inside him, and couldn't move his legs. System, you have a mortal wound. You are bleeding internally. You will lose 5 life per minute for the next 10 minutes. Your legs are broken, you cannot walk or run. You have a severe spinal injury, your movement speed is reduced by 92%. He looked up to see the harpy swooping down towards him and he rolled towards the left. It took everything he had, but he dodged the fatal blow. He slammed his mana tap skill as hard as he could. It sent a wave of nausea through him. Life 33 of 111. Mana 0 of 57. System, you are bleeding internally. You will lose 1 life per minute for the next 5 minutes. Your legs are damaged, movement speed while walking reduced by 50%. You have a spinal injury, movement speed while walking reduced by 20%, this is multiplicative with other sources of reduced movement speed. Movement speed reduction, currently 60%. The points he had put into mana tap were the only thing that saved his life. He might die anyway, but being able to heal critical wounds allowed him to fix his spine and legs enough to move. He stood up to face Lisa too. She was snarling, her back against the wall of the cliffs of agony. Do you think I can't smell the poison in that intelligence potion? What sort of blind fool tries to trick a harpy with salt root? Lisa too flew off the edge of the wall towards him. Boyd was out of ideas. He was in extreme amounts of pain, had little life, and was dramatically outranked by his opponent who he no longer had the drop on. He decided to try to get behind her and strangle her like the last Lisa. He steadied himself for her descent, planning to dodge and leap atop her back. A random rock dived into her body and grabbed her in its talons and then flew away. He watched it tear her skin away in its claws as she shrieked and moaned. Boyd stood there, startled, before backing against the cliff of agony and hiding his face. His mana slowly started to tick up. He mana tapped it back into life as fast as he could. System, quest accepted. Rock out for the rocks. It appears like there is a war between the rocks and the Harpys. Speak to Queen Granite Height of the rocks to learn more. If you complete this quest without failing matriarchy or help the Harpys, you may receive a unique reward. Pino was camped out by the fire in a low-slung chair. Boyd was furious, and seeing Pino just enraged him that much more. Boyd limped back up to the group and threw the intelligence potion at Pino's feet. He knew he should just walk away at this point, but he couldn't let it slide. That wasn't who he was. Chard started to step forward with his blades drawn, but Merlot placed his longstaff in his way. Indeed, we decided to see how you would react to this situation. Rosie approached him and cast a healing spell. Sarah followed with the same. He felt his legs heal and his life vault back to full. He was happy to receive the healing, but resentful that someone from Merlot's party was going to help him. He wanted to attack them, but he knew he had no chance. Merlot walked slowly toward Boyd. Do you understand what we were trying to show you? Do you understand the purpose of this exercise? Would it though? Merlot asked. You saw what happened with the harpy when she decided you weren't doing what she wanted. If you had given her the potion as you wanted, it likely would have resulted in her mothers all trying to kill you. If you had given them the potion, they likely would have used it kill the daughter, or just used it as proof for the Harpy King to kill all the daughters, or God knows what else. The truth of the matter is that we need those harpy feathers, and no matter what you think you know, you don't know what will happen in here. The maze will make things harder and more complex until you end up killing yourself chasing some piece of equipment you may not even need. Many learn this the hard way, and most of the time that results in death. You have a distinct advantage for this fight in that you are possibly the first person to ever actually speak to the Harpys and not just kill them. You are naive if you think this is going to be that simple though. Please, allow us to return to the original plan. I would prefer not to ask Chard to do things the harder way, but we will do so if we must. No, goddammit, I started this shit and I'm finishing it, Boyd said. Merlot threw his hands up in the air, then feel free. Help anyone you want. But you are falling into a classical trap. It may be 6 hours, or 6 days, or 6 months until you finish that quest. At any point, if you take the wrong turn, it could all fall apart. If I had to guess, the entire thing is linked to Cave's Wall, the nearby town. The most likely optimal solution would involve you somehow getting the Queen of the Rocks to marry the King of the Harpies, which would almost certainly trigger a subquest where the nearby town is now afraid of the two units as a combined power, and then you are forced to either save the town or save the Harpies/Rocks to avoid a war. At that point, you would probably end up spending weeks if not years brokering a peace. You would be a hero to the Rocks and a hero to the town. You would probably receive a very strong item for this. But at the end of the day, it all resets. This isn't real. You usually get to keep the item, but how far does that get you outside the maze? What happens here doesn't have permanency. And it won't help you get back to this Oklahoma you love. Figure out a way to resolve this soon, or Chard resolves it the old-fashioned way and we move on. I understand your interest, but the fact of the matter is we have a job to do, and it's getting to the point where you are standing in the way. Sure. How about you just give me a few hours, and then I'll back off? Merlot sighed, fine, boy, fine. But do hurry. Boyd realized Merlot had a point and sat down to consider the problem. He certainly wasn't any sort of relationship counselor, and he didn't have months to complete the quest. At the same time, he definitely needed some new items, or he was going to die. He knew he couldn't compete in his current status. If nothing else, he needed some money for food. Hey Merlot, quick question, if I can understand the Harpies, do you think I can understand the Harpy King? Probably. It seems like the only reason you can understand the Harpies at all is because you aren't seduced by them. If you can get the king to talk to you without eviscerating you first, you could probably have a conversation. Cool. Any chance y'all got whiskey here? Merlot laughed and snapped his finger. This is certainly one thing I can provide with ease. Boyd and the Harpy King sat at a makeshift table, passing the bottle of whiskey back and forth. It had been that way for a few hours. Just two guys enjoying a nice evening together, shooting the shit and trying to get by. There had been some initial struggles, but once Boyd produced the bottle of whiskey, things smoothed over pretty quick. Oklahoma's pretty nice. I mean, it ain't perfect, but it ain't bad. I do miss it. Miss my family. I hear that, man. Home ain't never perfect, but it's home, know what I mean? I couldn't just up and leave the cliffs of agony, even if I wanted to. This is where I live. It's where my family's from. Hell, I met Screamy here. I can't walk away from that. Damn straight, bud. The two of them clinked their makeshift glasses of whiskey and took a drink. Where'd you get this drink anyway? Got it from a buddy. I don't know where he got it from. This here's okay, but it ain't got the kick I was hoping for. We used to brew shine back in Oklahoma. The good shit. 100+ proof. Ain't never had it. Hell bud. Wish I had some, I'd let you take home a bottle. The two of them both took a drink at the same time, which led to a laugh. You know, most combatants that come around are just here for my feathers, but not you, man. You're pretty cool. What race are you again? I'm called a human, I guess. I'm not used to being asked that question. The Harpy King nodded his head as he talked. Human. Sweet. I hope I meet more of you. Man, it would only take the one. You wouldn't even see if comin' either. Boom. Right in the head. One shot, one kill, and then I'd fricassee your ass with some jalapeno peppers. The Harpy King playfully tackled Boyd. Ah yeah, let me see what you got, big boy. Think you're so damn tough. Boyd was a competent wrestler, but it was obvious the Harpy King was immensely stronger. He tried to take the bird in a choke, immediately felt bad after he realized that's how he killed his new friend's daughter, and then relented. The Harpy King took that moment to flip over and land on top of him. The Harpy King began hacking and coughing until he got a large ball of what looked like leftover rock out of his craw. "I'ma hack this rock on you if you don't say it." He slowly let the ball of spittle, blood and rock parts dangle from his throat over Boyd's head. The Harpy King began laughing and slurped the mixture back into his craw. "Tastes good though. Tastes better with a little whiskey too." He helped Boyd up and they walked back to their table. They continued to chat as they polished off the bottle of whiskey. Boyd poured himself and the Harpy King each another shot of whiskey. "I feel ya for sure, bud. Sounds like it's damn near impossible to navigate all that." The Harpy King hung his head before nudging Boyd with his claw. "Aw shit, she's comin' now. Dude, hide the whiskey for she sees." "I don't need that lecture again." Boyd quickly placed the whiskey he was given under his shirt and then rolled it to his back. He casually looked to the side in order to appear less conspicuous. The older Harpy who had been yelling at them slowly descended to where they had been sitting. It was a small alcove hidden in the cliffs that the Harpy King used as a home away from home of sorts. "God damn it, Annie, how many times we gotta talk about this? You knew I was married to Screamy when we first got together. I'm a Harpy King, god damn it. How you think I am gonna be the Harpy King with one wife?" Clarence's eyes perked up. Boyd shook his head. He'd seen that reaction before. No way he was getting away with it now. "I didn't even say she was a rock." "You said that." Clarence turned back towards her. "No, you said it," he replied dryly. Clarence the Harpy King raised his wings. "Girls, can we?" Screamy raised her claw. "Girls? Who is girls?" "We are adults. We are your wives." "This is part of the problem, Clarence, you speak to us like you own us." Boyd didn't know what to say, but he was fairly sure that nothing he could say would help his new friend. Honestly, he'd seen similar things happen to friends of his before, and generally he felt the best course of action was always to avoid this as much as possible. While his plan had been to unite the Harpy and Rock kingdoms around Clarence, the Harpy King, he was quickly discovering this might not be possible. Squawk. 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 Boyd looked up to see the largest rock he had ever seen descending into the nest. From its size, Boyd assumed it must be the oldest and most powerful of the rocks, but from its plumage he deduced it was also likely the queen. Amongst her feathers were chains of gemstones and gold strewn from wing to wing. It appeared to be done as lingerie, which made Boyd uncomfortable as he thought he might be looking at the queen in some sort of state of undress. Clarence, the Harpy King, looked up and said, "Oh shit. Boyd, we got a problem, buddy. You might want to get out while you can." "I got your back, bro," Boyd said. He was surprised to discover he truly did, the power of male friendship having overtaken basic common sense yet again. Squawk. 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 While Boyd could speak Harpy, he clearly couldn't speak rock. In spite of this, the rock's message was clear. She was now nuzzling up to Clarence, the Harpy King, and performing what he assumed was some sort of mating strut. At the same time, the bird sat upon the ground and began pointing her wings at the two Harpies and squawking loudly while wafting the shit smell at the both of them aggressively. Whatever the bird had said was clearly beyond offensive, as now Annie took to the air and pounced on the rock that Boyd assumed was Queen Granite Hide. Screamy began throwing rocks at the two of them aggressively from a short distance away. Annie and Queen Granite Hide's life bars began plummeting as they tore at one another and were pounded by rocks. It seemed like Screamy was likely going to come out the victor, when she suddenly disappeared in a whoosh of feathers. The eldest Lisa had scooped Screamy from the ground and was now slashing her throat in the air as they two squabbled. Everyone stop. Everyone stop killing each other. Clarence the Harpy King yelled. He walked over to Queen Granite Hide and Annie and tried to pull them apart, but was met with a claw to the face. Stop attacking me, there's more than enough to go around. I can be with all of you. It don't have to turn out this way. Boyd was watching this and trying to figure out how to intervene. The original plan was to turn the Harpy King into a friend. He would then use the Harpy King to ingratiate himself into community in the hopes of winning them over. He would then try to complete as many of the quests as he could at the same time. Currently, this did not seem a likely outcome. He needed all of them to stop fighting as fast as possible. Can everyone please stop trying to kill each other and we can work this out? Hey, yo ladies and birds, can we all please just stop for a minute and talk this out? It doesn't have to be like this. I talked with Clarence and he told me he cares for all of you. Y'all got this all wrong, this a good man right here who's trying to do right by all of you. We had a couple whiskey drinks together and he told me the whole thing, he burned his heart out to me. For real, y'all ought to just forgive him and give this thing a chance. There was a pause as Annie and Queen Granite Hide stopped scratching at each other. Both of their life bars were extremely low, although it looked like Queen Granite Hide might end up the winner. Elder Lisa and a nearly dead Screamy came flying back. Annie started crying. You been drinking again. Clarence, are you serious? You promised me. Lisa swooped down onto the scene. He's drinking again? Annie, did I just hear you right? Is he drinking again? Annie was in full meltdown mode. She had collapsed onto the ground and was starting to weep. Do you remember the last time, Clarence? Do you remember coming home in a stupor? You stepped on our eggs, Clarence. You killed our babies. You fell asleep in their fertilized yolks and you still said you didn't have a problem. We had to drag you to rehab and force you to admit it and you said never again. You said never again. How could you? Never again, Clarence. And with some random adventurer? Some random guy comes around and instead of killing him after telling all my babies they can't be with their mamas but they gotta go yell at the cliffs, you give all that up for some random adventurer. To impress some nobody? Squawk, 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 squawk. Queen Granite Hide's squawks were particularly squawky this time. Clarence, the Harpy King, hung his head. Boyd, gimme that whiskey bottle. Boyd reluctantly handed it over. He had no idea what the Harpy King would do with it, but he was quite certain that unless something changed, one or more of these groups was going to kill him before he could work his way out of this. Clarence stumbled forward. You see this bottle? You want to know why I'm drinking again? 'Cause I can't never get no respect from none of you. None of you ever think about me. It's always eggs this, and daughters that. When you gonna provide us a new boy, Clarence? When you gonna fertilize those eggs, Clarence? When you gonna bring us some decent food, Clarence? What about me? What about Clarence? Huh? When y'all gonna do something for me? So yeah, I had a little drink. I got a little excited to make a friend that was a male, and I had a couple drinks. I ain't even drunk, watch this. Just watch this, and tell me I'm drunk. I can prove it. Clarence flew high into the air and swooped low across the ground. He then rose high into the air and flapped himself into a stationary but wobbly situation. You see that? That was a perfect swoop. Executed to perfection, baby. Ain't nobody been drinking gonna be able to swoop like that. This human was the only one drinking. You tell her, Boyd. Tell her you was the only one. Boyd was confused as Clarence had already admitted he was drinking, but he stood behind his friend as he said he would. Boyd straightened up and said, yeah, it was just me. We was talkin' but he didn't drink. Just me. I can prove it, watch this. I bet I can swoop from twice that high. Boyd felt an immediate kinship with Clarence. He had seen this move before. This was, in fact, a classic play from his old friend Walker's book. It had variable results. Usually it either got him laid or it got him severely injured. Walker and Boyd had both agreed a long time it was usually worth it. Squawk. Lisa concurred with Queen Granite Hide and tried to stop him, but he was already flying high. Don't you dare, baby. Clarbear, I believe you, baby, don't do nothing stupid. Please, baby, I love you. Boyd was cheering him on though. You got this, buddy. Show 'em what fair. Clarence was already mid-dive. He gave a thumbs-up sign to Boyd as he passed him. Boyd thought he was majestic, angelic in his flight. He marveled at the rapid descent and the beautiful arc that Clarence, the Harpy King, cut against the sky. Until Clarence hit the ground with a dull thud. System, the Harpy King has died from taking 740 fall damage. All Harpies in the area are now enraged. The Harpies immediately began tearing each other apart. Lisa and Screamy began slashing at each other desperately, whereas Queen Granite Hide had already torn Annie's head from her body. The Rock Queen was bleeding profusely though, and clearly wasn't going to make it. System, Queen Granite Hide has died. All rocks in the area are now enraged. An audible and horrible screeching happened shortly after, and the sky was filled with harpies. Screamy looked up to yell something, which was just the opening Lisa needed. She slashed through Screamy's throat, who subsequently died, with a gurgle. Lisa scowled at Boyd. He prepared to fight her, but she instead took into the air. Lisus! Kill the Annies and Screamies! The harpies in the air began frantically attacking one another. Boyd had to take cover as Harp's bodies began falling from the sky like cannonballs. He didn't know a Lisa from an Annie, but it seemed like most everything was dying. The screeching became louder and louder until it became physically painful to him. Life 104 of 111. He began to run from the scene only to see an armada of rocks heading his way. He dived back into the alcove he had shared with the Harpy King and watched the rocks sail overhead. They collided with the mass of harpies in an amalgamation of claws and feathers. Rocks and harpies fell from the sky in droves. He finally ducked and covered his head. The roof of the alcove protected him from falling harpies and rocks. He was still taking sonic damage, but he just mana-tapped the damage back as it came in. After about 15 minutes, the awful din of screeching stopped, and he went out of his little hidey spot to look around. He guessed there was at least 100 dead harpies and 100 dead rocks. Laying in the middle was Clarence, the Harpy King. He felt a bit of sadness and loss at the sight of his dead friend. It was nice to have someone he could relate to for once. They had bonded even if it was brief. Not enough to keep him from looting the Harpy King though. He plucked as many of Clarence's feathers as he could from Merlot and started to head back down the cliffs. He saw Lisa fly off into the distance, holding an egg in each claw. He wondered what would become of her. System, quest failed, help the harpies, most of the harpies are dead. Obviously this wasn't helpful. System, quest failed, don't help the harpies, genocide the colony means no one lives. One of the Lisas got away with some eggs, so you failed this one too. System, quest failed, matriarchy, the Harpy King died, but not by your hand, and the matriarchy did not rise this time either. System, quest failed, rock out for the rocks, Queen Granite Hide died, so no credit here either. You suck at this. System, quest failed, bird hunting, most of the rocks are dead, but the harpies are gone too, so I am calling it a tie. So this is another failure. System, you have entered stasis. System, you have exited stasis. Time elapsed 0.02 microseconds. System, quest accepted, accomplish literally anything with regards to the harpies. System, quest complete, accomplish literally anything with regards to the harpies. I had to come up with something where you get a reward or none of this makes sense. Go talk to the mayor of Caveswall. I had to retcon a bunch of shit to make this happen, so no whining about the reward. Be happy I gave you something. A reward was good, but that GNFNR shirt did sound pretty cool. Shit, Boyd said sadly. Sir Boyd. You return. I am surprised to see you. With all of the commotion on the cliffs of agony, I had assumed that you were likely a casualty. Merlot doffed his cap and bowed to Boyd. Nah dude. I'm good. Indeed, and our bargain? Boyd fished a few of Clarence's feathers out of his inventory bag. Merlot's Merrymen looked on with excitement. Here you go man, fair's fair. Merlot examined the feathers, these will do. Perhaps, and indulge me here, do you have any more? Boyd eyes Merlot suspiciously. I got a few, why? I propose another trade. As you might have noticed, there are a substantial number of mana nodes in the back of the Harpy lair and additional nodes in the rock lair. I would be willing to trade you a functional and unused mana array that allows you to tap mana nodes in exchange for your remaining feathers. Moreover, I would be happy to split the nodes with you. Well, we could probably just go take them, I would rather we remain friends. Me too dude. But is that like a fair trade? Not really. I am taking advantage of your situation if I am being honest. Boyd eyes him again, what would be more fair? Depends on how many feathers you have, Merlot said slyly. Boyd opened his pack and showed it to Merlot. If I were to compensate you with an additional 10,000 gold, it would be close to market value for this many Harpy King feathers. But Zenith is not a fair market. I will give you 500 gold in addition to the mana array. 5,000 gold, Boyd retorted. Merlot said, 1,000 gold, and shoved his hand towards Boyd. Deal, Boyd said. He didn't really care that he was getting ripped off. He needed the gold and the friends. Moreover, he had no idea what the value of anything was to begin with. Chard was plaiting a lute in the corner, shall we then? Boyd looked at him, shall we do what? Merlot's Merrymen laughed and Pinot said, we are here for mana Sir Boyd. Let's go gather it. System, you have attuned a new mana array. You may now collect mana yourself. You are unbound to any foray. Your mana array is unlinked and will not provide mana to outside entities currently. System, you have gained 10 mana nodes. Which of the guards are we gonna kill? Boyd asked. Also, I think I get a reward for all the shit with the Harpies, so if we can avoid pissing off the whole town it might be good. Sarah giggled, you're so funny Sir Boyd. She flew over to him and gently punched him on the shoulder before batting her eyes at him. Why would we ever hurt one of the guards? I thought that was the easiest way to get past the guards. Merlot's Merrymen all collectively laughed. Merlot clapped Boyd on the back, why would anyone ever kill one of the guards? You just have to show your paperwork and you can walk right past them. Where is your paperwork, Sir Boyd? I hold all of the paperwork for the group so we can just show the guard a single time. It just makes things simpler for them and we try not to waste their valuable time. Boyd was unused to hearing guards spoken of in this way. Where do you usually get paperwork? What happens if you don't have any? Rosie looked at him with concern, you do have your paperwork right? I don't think I ever got paperwork. Sarah gasped, everyone has paperwork, Sir Boyd, how could you even get into Zenith if you didn't have paperwork showing who you were? Well, when I got kidnapped by the computer lady. Chard and Rosie gasped again, oh you poor thing. They floated over and held his hands, before he could continue. Merlot ran his hands through his long beard. I bet we have a way to fix this. Pinot, maybe you can assist our new friend? Pinot laughed and performed a grandiose bow and then pulled out a piece of paper. As Yuva's finest poet, I am sure I can come up with something. Pinot extracted a pen from his hat and he began writing on a scroll. His pen glowed brighter and brighter and he began to write. What once started as words became frantic scribbling as his hand moved faster and faster. He scribbled on the middle of the page, but words began filling up all points and places. After a few seconds, he produced a document that extensively credentialed Boyd as a combatant in this year's maze, and suggested he be allowed safe passage to any place available to the year's combatants. So all I need is this piece of paper? Pinot bowed extensively and doffed his cap, this is the least I can do for our honorable new friend. When they approached the guard, he casually accepted their papers and the group marched into town. Boyd had assumed they would leave each other at this point, but Merlot was insistent they share a drink together. They set off towards the local inn, which was where Boyd had intended to go either way. Eventually, they wound up at a place called Glip Glop's Hip Hop House Flip Flop House. It was marked by a large red circle with a single line through the middle, which Boyd couldn't process as to how that sign would ever indicate anything related to the building. Unlike the previous inns, this place was more akin to a Russian discotheque than a traditional high fantasy inn. It featured what Boyd thought was most closely related to house music, with occasional flashing strobe light. It had a dance floor in the middle of the room, but curiously, everyone was sitting at tables eating casually like it was fine dining. The juxtaposition of what Boyd imagined a European rave would look like and the casualness of the diners left him confused, but he followed along anyway, happy to be included. The group set a large table together and ordered drinks and food, although Boyd had no idea what any of it actually was. They regaled each other with stories of combat for a few hours as they drank and ate together. It was the first time Boyd felt like he had actual friends since he had come to the maze. Merlot's combat abilities were far exceeded by his drinking ability. Boyd was stone-cold drunk at this point in the evening, whereas the Merrymen were largely untouched in comparison. The thumping bass from the music was driving his drinking ever onward, despite the fact he had no idea where the music was coming from. Merlot yelled across the table, "Sir Boyd, tell us of your prior adventures. What fool would ever banish you from their company? I am surprised that anyone could ever possibly not see the value in a fine friend such as yourself." Boyd yelled back, "Yeah, so I showed up and then I killed a bunch of these slender thing. Well, actually my buddies did most of it. They ain't really my buddies, I guess. I thought of them like that, but they weren't like me and Walker or nothing, so maybe I need to figure out something else to call them. They each split up and just wasted these little dudes in like no time flat though. Then we had to walk to Portcullis, which took a long time, because I was only rank 3. I did kill some gorplings. Then when we got to city, we killed the guard like I told you about, and then I went looking for mana with Fleein. We ended up getting some, but then The music played on, but the table stopped talking. Hold on a second, Chard said. Who did you go with? I'm getting to the best part. I used a big-ass stone head to squish this dude named Demon Dread, and I took his sword and did some multi-classing, but I think I told you that Fleein broke my shit so I can't rank up right now. Then I was killing Weevils and y'all showed up. Boyd realized he had drunkenly let the name slip again, and now hoped he could just brush past it. Merlot raised his hand. Explain to me again, to which foray did you belong? Oh, I was part of Fleein's fine foray for the Filari. Boyd looked at the faces around him sag. Even through his drunken haze, he knew what this meant. The table grew immediately cold. He saw each of Merlot's party stare at each other and then to Merlot himself. Merlot clenched his beard and then rubbed his fingers from his mustache to the tip of his beard. He spoke after a few seconds. I see. This is Fleein of the Filari, correct? Yeah, you know him or something? You could say that. Many know of him, although I have never met him myself. Indeed. Well, best of luck to you, Sir Boyd. I believe my band of merrymakers has another appointment on the other side of town. Unfortunately, we will need to pay our tab and leave. Boyd felt the tension at this point. He looked over at Rosie and Sarah, but they wouldn't meet his stare. Chard was already standing and was halfway out the door. Dude, did I do something wrong? What happened here? Nothing at all, Sir Boyd. Nothing at all. Best of luck in your quest. I hope to meet again someday. Merlot and the rest of the group were donning the rest of their attire to leave at this point. Wait, I thought we might be able to join up. Even if I can't be in your foray, we can just adventure together, right? We shared some mana just then? Boyd asked. Pinot turned around. I won't have the ire of the Filari on our foray, nor will I associate with their companions. He spat on the ground. Easy brother, Merlot said. He leaned forward close to Boyd and whispered, "Be careful with that information, Sir Boyd. Not everyone will be as forgiving as Merlot's Merrymen." As quickly as they had saved him, the group left. Boyd set a table with 6 empty plates of food and 6 full mugs of ale. Again, he was alone. He drank the alesh by himself, and picked at the food, but it was mostly inedible in his view. The waitress came to his table after a few minutes and demanded the full amount for the ale and food. Boyd paid her with the gold coins he had from the prior battles, and stood up. He was drunk and could barely walk. The waitress thanked him and handed him a piece of paper with an eye towards the bar. A man was staring at him. "Mr. Glipgulp wanted to speak with you," she said. She curtsied and walked away. The bartender was wiping down the bar, as all good bartenders do. He gave a head nod towards Boyd, who sauntered over to him. He turned his back as Boyd arrived and walked towards the other side of the room. The man sitting at the bar stuck his hand out and smiled. Boyd shook it after a few misses. He eyed Boyd up and down and then said, "Did I hear you say you were with the Filari?" Boyd had been talking with the man at the bar for nearly an hour, mostly about nothing. The bartender had refused to give him more alcohol, or whatever the equivalent was here on Zenith, and instead, had given him some potion to slowly sober him up. "So all I have to do is go to the Venian Enclave and give them this box, and then they will give me a separate box? And then I bring that back to you? And then I can sleep here as much as I want?" "This is correct," Glipgulp said. Glipglop was a race Boyd hadn't seen before. His skin was grey and slick, but otherwise he looked somewhat mammalian and human-like as well. He was missing a nose and ears, but instead had slits that Boyd assumed served some sort of similar purpose. He was shorter than Boyd, but also wider, and his body rippled with what Boyd assumed was dense musculature. He attempted to scan the creature but got no information. "This is where I am supposed to ask what's in the box, but it's sort of like the airport thing, you know? Like I know they are going to ask me if anyone else touched my baggage, so if I don't know if anyone touched it, I don't have to lie. You feel me?" "I have no idea what your babbling means," Glipgulp said. "Figures. Either way, I'll do it. Where are the Venians?" "Rockrot hits you for 5 damage. Rockrot cannot be cured without essence of earth." The innkeeper pointed to a dot on the map he held in front of him and then passed it to Boyd. Upon receiving it, a map icon lit up in his display and he realized he could now overlap a map with the local terrain over his vision. This was extremely helpful. "System, you have gained an area map. So can I stay in the inn tonight?" Boyd asked. "Did you deliver the box?" No, I haven't even left yet." Glipgulp went back to slicing what looked like bread into thick chunks of doughy goodness. "Then no. Go deliver the box." Boyd looked at Glipglop with a derisive glare and started to walk out the door, before doubling back. "Can I at least have some food?" Glipglop flipped him a couple of hunks of what looked like bread. He grunted impolitely and then shooed Boyd away with his arm. Boyd quickly devoured both pieces of bread. They were days old, but there wasn't any sign of mold and they tasted better than most of the things he had eaten on Zenith. He spent a few minutes examining his map, spinning in circles, while watching the dot representing the Venian compound spin with him. He decided he would stop by the mayor's house, and then head out for the next quest. Hi. I'm Boyd. I heard you had a reward for me?" The mayor of Caveswall was a small stout man sitting at a large desk. He was filling out paperwork with a quill and an ink jar on his desk. He didn't look up when Boyd entered his chamber. He had a long gray beard and looked like he'd seen a number of battles from the scars on his face. Boyd assumed he was a dwarf, but he wasn't comfortable saying it aloud though, so he just tried to his best to avoid the topic. "I don't know you," the mayor said. He still hadn't looked up. Yeah, I'm aware. I don't know you either. I was the one who killed all them harpies and rocks up the way on the Cliffs of Agony. I was told you might be appreciative. Like monetarily." Boyd had no idea what the reward would be, but he figured gold would always come in handy, and he didn't feel like carrying around a bunch of extra stuff. The mayor looked up. "Ah, our harpy killer. You have removed one of our town's primary resources, as well as a useful food source in the rocks. Were it up to me, I would have you drawn and quartered in the town square. You were foolhardy and thoughtless in your actions. There could have been a peace negotiated that would have benefited all." The mayor went back to writing. "Oh. No reward then?" The mayor spoke while he wrote. "Unfortunately, I am not a despot, and the town feels different. My finest skinners have gone to Colony to remove as much of the dead harpy's useful materials as possible. They have made you these as a means of saying thank you, although I am still unsure what we are thanking you for." The mayor tossed a box towards Boyd. "See your way out." "Thanks, dude," Boyd said before walking out of the room. Quest completed. System, quest accepted. Accomplish literally anything with regards to the harpies. Uncultured swine activated. He was sitting on a bench just outside the mayor's office. It was pretty clear from his prior conversation that he wasn't receiving the highest quality reward from his quest, but at least he was getting something, and maybe his uncultured swine feature would help him out. He opened his box, assuming it would be a box full of harpy feathers he would have to trade for something more useful like he had done with Merlot. Instead, he found the first thing he was truly excited about since entering Zenith. They were beautiful. They reminded him of his dress boots, which were made of ostrich leather. His old boots had spots in the leather vamp where you could where the quills used to be. These boots had the quill spots, but on the upper leather instead. The vamp was obviously made of some sort of rock-hard material that would protect his feet, but was lumpy and irregular. Moreover, the toe felt like it was crafted out of titanium and would provide him a lot of support in addition to protecting him from standard alkies. He's been wearing the same pair of tennis shoes since he entered, and they were rapidly degrading. These boots were a substantial upgrade. They had a distinctive smell, but Boyd found it tolerable. He strapped them on to find they perfectly. He was thrilled. System, you have acquired harpyskin rock boots of the Nomadic Domicile Repository, unique. These boots were crafted especially for Boyd Bridges of Oklahoma in response to his failed efforts to unite the harpies. Crafted from an amalgamation of rock and harpy skins, they are both extremely lightweight and extremely durable. Wearing these boots causes general disdain from polite society due to their stench and largely appalling appearance. Adds plus 50 armor to attacks against your feet. Adds 15 damage to all kick attacks. Grants skill, uncommon chemistry, stimulants, Mark III. Through a lifetime of experimentation, you have learned how to generate stimulants using commonly available items. Grant skill, uncommon chemistry, depressants, Mark III. Through a lifetime of experimentation, you have learned how to generate depressants using commonly available items. Your charisma has a maximum value of 1 for the purposes of interactions with any NPC designated as royalty or above. System, welcome to the crafting menu. You now have access to Mark III uncommon chemistry. Boyd started examining all the crafting menu options. It appeared like for anything he wanted to make he would need some very specific items, in addition to an array of different things he could use to craft specific items. He didn't have much of what he needed currently, but many things were marked as available at Apothecary. He wasn't sure what that thing was, but he would have to stay on the lookout for it. The good news is that he found he could easily make low-level stimulants and depressants from commonly available herbs and shrubs. Some of this required distillation equipment that he was largely familiar with from making moonshine, and some of it required more advanced equipment that he had a strange familiarity with despite never seeing the words before. The best news was that many local plants he could now identify with ease, and understand some of their properties. As he browsed the list of potential items, 2 of them came to mind with immediate potential purposes. System, stimulant, class 3, pulverized jet crystals. Jet is a pitch-black rock found in many of the cavernous areas on Zenith. When purified appropriately, it is a common reagent in class 5 stimulants. The problem is, purifying it is extremely expensive. It's much easier to just crush and snort it. Pulverized jet comes with the large disadvantage of being horribly addictive and delivering crushing hangovers. Pulverized jet provides time dilation 50% for 15 seconds. After this 15-second period, pulverized jet causes jet hangover. For every second you are affected by pulverized jet, you will be subjected to soul-crushing levels of nausea and disorientation. Taking multiple doses of pulverized jet enhances time dilation effect, but doubles the duration of the jet hangover effect afterwards. Warning: this substance is highly addictive. The other compound of interest was a depressant. Warning: this substance is highly addictive. Boyd didn't really know shit about shit, but he knew drugs. Drugs were useful. You could take them, you could trade them, you could hide them for a rainy day. They were something he understood. He liked coke and meth and liquor and weed and LSD and mushrooms and basically everything else, but over time, he learned that you had to like these things selectively. For instance, if you were having a bad day, then smoking a joint might make it better. If you were having a really bad day, then smoking a joint might make it worse. That was knowledge he could use. He scrolled through the list until he found some things that looked a little less intimidating and found some assorted plants. He eventually crafted a few different items that loosely equated to cigarettes. System: stimulant, class 0, Rebsatesthi weed, a very mild stimulant. Can be drank after boiling or smoked as is. Non-addictive. Mildly increased movement speed and mental acuity. Also tasty. They were mild stimulants that provided him a small boost in acuity and movement speed, and were largely non-addictive. They had a different name, but he decided to call these Reds after both his favorite cigarette and the plant that he derived them from. He rolled up a couple of extra Reds for the road. As soon as he could, he had a couple other things to brew up. Since he couldn't be physically exhausted due to his inherent ability, he realized he didn't actually have to pace himself anymore. He wasn't fast, but he took off at what amounted to 70% of a dead sprint in the proper direction. The only reason he wasn't going full tilt is that his pack clanged around, and it made a bunch of noise. It was also extremely uncomfortable as the strap on his pack slapped in him in the back of his head repeatedly. He had already learned his lesson about staying on the road. While the areas off the road were definitely dangerous and filled with monsters, the fact that he could run into a full foray on the road meant it was really no option at all. He'd take a chance that he might die over a chance he would die, as he guessed the next group wouldn't be nearly as friendly as Merlot, especially since he had some mana now. The off-road route meant that he could continue to hone his Weevil killing strategy too. They continued to rise up from the ground at random intervals, but once Boyd realized that a quick stomp from his new boots could wipe out a ground dirt Weevil conglomerate quickly, they were mostly a source of great experience. He'd pounce on the swirls and drive his boot deep into the ground, ignoring the smaller creatures. He continued his merry way along the off-roads, alternately jump-stomping piles of swirling dirt and then dashing off into the distance. The Venian compound itself was visible from several hundred meters away. It looked like a futuristic beehive had been carved into the wall of a cave. It was clearly massive if you were a Venian, but no more than just large if you were a human. The front was guarded by 2 VMRs, which immediately tripped a few bells for Boyd. He very carefully waved his hands from a distance and then did the international sign for "I mean no harm" by showing his palms with his arms extended. He realized quickly that this wasn't necessarily the case in his new habitat, so instead he just shouted, "I got a package for y'all from Glipglop." The VMRs stood still, looked at one another, and then motioned him forward. While Boyd was walking forward, one of them left in a hurry, but the other stayed where it was. "What's the package?" "Hell if no. Glipglop said I could stay at the inn if I delivered this." "Who is Glipglop?" the VMR asked. "Man, I don't know. He acted like he knew you. He said deliver the package." "I am delivering the package." "You ever heard of don't shoot the messenger?" "No. In fact, shooting the messenger is commonly a good idea if they are delivering you something you don't need or want." "Did this Glipglop tell you who it was supposed to go to here?" "No, he said the Venians would be interested in this, and to go give it to them and say it's from Glipglop, and then I got food and a place to stay, which I badly need. The VMR scanned the box extensively and then opened it carefully. Whatever was inside it was definitely of interest, because the VMR closed it almost instantly and then began chattering into its radio in a language the system couldn't translate. Alright, we're good. Go. That's it? Seriously? I just give you the box and then we are good? The VMR flew up close to him and then looked at him curtly. You do know what delivery means, right? What did you think was going to happen? I don't know. I guess past experience led me to believe this could go a lot worse. Well, it didn't. Thank your lucky stars. Will do. Thanks. Thank you. Be careful on the way out. Stick to the road. Boyd nodded and headed out. He wasn't going to stick to the road originally, and he definitely wasn't now. He silently thanked his lucky stars that things went so well. He thought that he had been worrying for nothing. Mysterious box delivered, no alarms tripped, no issues of any kind actually. He'd have a place to sleep and food to eat. The bread he had eaten wasn't great, but it was a hell of a lot better than hunger. He didn't know if they had butter on Zenith, but it was the first thing he'd ask for when he sat down. Butter and beer and some meat. He'd eat anything as long as it tasted like meat. He smiled as he walked back towards the poorly lit cavern and away from the open area of the Venian enclave. System, you have completed the quest. Deliver a box to the Venian enclave. Return to Glipglop to accept your reward. The ensuing explosion knocked him almost directly sideways. Salia Slit was observing the Venian base from a distance. She wasn't sure how many VMRs were in it, but none of them were a match for hers, of that she was sure. She assumed all 5 members of the Venian foray would be there, but hopefully someone had died already, or at the least, was sleeping and wouldn't be able to join the fight. One-on-one, she was unstoppable. She was the best VMR pilot Venia had. Besides, the VMR Mark VI, as she called her own unit, was an order of magnitude stronger than whatever they were using. Her ordnance alone was enough to take out half of Venia, much less a small Venian base. She couldn't just start dropping nukes though, she needed things from there. The Venian team had been carefully selected for some of the best pilot on the planet. Doing this the hard way wasn't going to be hard, but it wasn't going to be easy. Those were Venians she'd trained. Venians she'd trained with. Venians who had betrayed her. It was no concern. That was for another time. What's done is done. Venia betrayed her, and she had decided to take the admittedly petulant stance of betraying them right back. Technically, she reminded herself, she hadn't betrayed them. Not yet. Not really. Of course they hadn't let her on the mana gathering team after she explained what she wanted to do, but simply joining another team wasn't really betraying Venia. While using VMR tech without authorization was against Venian law, Venia would have reaped its fair share, and she could make the argument it was just more benefit. But they wouldn't like that she stole the tech she needed. And they wouldn't like that she had upgraded her own VMR well past any reasonable specifications, and without permission or dispensation of the underlying tech. But she hadn't killed any Venians. Not yet. She'd killed for Venia, of course. Hundreds. Thousands. She had no problem doing it again. Killing was nothing to her now. Sure, the first time was hard, but the second time was less so, and the third time was nothing. Then Emla died. She'd lost her love. Now killing was all she thought about. Killing anyone and everyone who was at fault. Wiping Saldas off the map and then sending Venia with it if they wouldn't back her. There wasn't going to be mercy for the Saldas while she was still alive. Not now. Not ever. If that meant taking out a few Venians first, then so be it. Power at 378% of 100%. Recommend reducing output by 278%. Please confirm. Salia mentally clicked the button for no. Increasing the range and power of the heavy metal flechette system was simple, it just required bracing. The prior system she worked on used a bracketing system that stuck into the ground. It effectively made the VMR a tripod. The amount of force that you could produce this way was incredible, but ultimately limited by physics. The VMR weighed a substantial amount, but the amount of kick on shooting a heavy metal flechette at several thousand meters per second was substantial. Eventually, the VMR would just flip head over heels and rip the bracing right out of the ground. The key was giving two opposite sources of thrust without crushing the thing in between. Once she got the timing down, it was simple. The flechette gives a positive force, thrusters provide a negative force. Where does the kinetic energy go from those two smashing into each other? Right back into the VMR's power core, of course. Why waste good physics? The reaction actually created enough energy to power itself. An almost fully contained system. Venian engineering at its finest. It would have crushed most creatures, but most creatures weren't metal alloy exoskeletons encompassing a tiny creature. The flechette itself was simply a 1-foot-long spiraled rod with an augured tip. Its weight on Earth would have been about 10 kilos. It would have taken a machine embedded into a cliff wall to fire the same amount of material on Earth at high speed. Salia could fire one herself. Thrusters charged to 400% safe levels of power. Flechette system aligned. Prepare for impact. Salia initiated firing and waited. Nothing happened. It was perfect engineering. Her own beautiful work. She mentally clicked the button and millions upon millions of joules of energy all countered one another just perfectly, and were captured with eloquent efficiency, soaked right back into the VMR's power unit. She couldn't really say nothing happened though, as one thing definitely happened. A 10-kilo metal rod hurtled through the air until it eventually went through the head of the VMR, piloted by her old friend Resna Callow a few miles away. Salia magnified her vision right after she shot, but she couldn't get focused in time to see the actual blow hit. Instead, by the time she got focused, there was a defunct VMR on the ground and a tiny speck of blood in the middle of it. The flechette round had gone entirely through the VMR and embedded in the cave wall behind her. Salia was concerned it would be louder than it was when it hit the wall, but it stuck so hard that it didn't cause any further damage and embedded with a thwop. One down. A few more to go. It was a mine, but not typical. That meant naming the contraption was pretty easy, it was an atypical mine. She had worked on a number of what she called atypical mines that functioned through some other mechanism than high explosives. The whole point of a mine was to keep someone away from something you were interested in. It hardly made sense to Salia to have it make some thundering boom and wake you up. So much easier to just silently clean up the mess. The mine produced a two-phase reaction that was triggered by proximity. The first phase of the reaction was mixing of two chemicals native to Venia that were scarce in most other places. Oxazone was simply a four-membered oxygen structure analogous to molecular oxygen that exists in a highly excited state. When mixed with liquid tetranitrocyanogen, and then set aflame in the second phase, the ensuing highly controlled reaction produced a thick liquid vapor of around 2200 Kelvin without more than a whisper. This was hot enough to melt basically anything, including titanium/Venetium alloys. As long as the mixture stayed separate in the mine itself, it was completely stable. Any activation of one mine would result in activation of all other local mines though. The end result was an extremely deadly mist that could be extended as far as you had mines. If there was one thing Salia had, it was mines. They were small, compact, and simple to store inside her VMR. She had already mined the area around Resna's body extensively. She wasn't sure who would show up first, but she was very sure of the result if they did. The VMR was an immensely powerful device. Her people had become reliant on it and had forgotten life without it after only a few short years. Venians didn't know fear. They didn't think about danger. They'd fought and won a war where the entire population lost 6 warriors. 6 against thousands of soldads. The Venian Engineering Council called it an outstanding success. A nearly flawless victory. Only 6 casualties. It was 6, but all Salia ever thought of was 5 and Emla. She was counting on the fact that all of Venia thought that 6 was okay. 6 was good enough. 6 meant they were invincible. As soon as Resna's emergency beacon went off, the Venians would come running because nothing could hurt them. Salia was counting on that. Most VMRs were nearly identical, minus the small insignias present on the upper right of the chest. Salia didn't actually see who triggered the first mine, and she was quite sure she would never know. Her mines didn't have a trip noise or any other warning. If you got close enough, they just all went off and you died. Boom. Melted. The VMR blasted into existence at top speed and was promptly disintegrated just as fast. The mines all went off nearly simultaneously. Whoever was in the VMR was dead in seconds. Salia watched as the VMR thrusted forward down the cavern tunnel to presumably see what had gone wrong with their partner. They tried briefly to stop before the first mine went off. From there, it was like watching ice melt on a hot stove. The vapor fog disintegrated the VMR in seconds. Bits of metal and wire and a tiny spat of blood was all that was left. Salia, again now watching from afar, tried again to find the insignia through her telescopic vision, but the corpse was too far gone almost instantly. No matter. 2 down. A few more to go. Klarsrix was walking down the tunnels towards his Forays mana array. It was part of his duty. They weren't deep enough to start worrying about thieves yet, but you never really knew. They also weren't deep enough to get to the point where teams would really start fighting for what was left, but they also weren't shallow enough that a few of the weaker teams might try to poach and exit. It was an age-old strategy that was always a possibility. Leaving something totally unguarded was always a risk. He rounded the metal hallways that lined their makeshift base. One of the major advantages the Venian foray had was the new pop-up technology they had created. While most forays would be stuck inside whatever passed for an inn and whatever passed for a town, Venians were exceptionally good at rapidly turning nearly anything into a well-designed fort. In this case, it had largely been a function of blasting a few cavern walls and setting up the engineering systems they needed. Venian miniaturization technology was amongst the best in the galaxy, and since they were tiny as a species, putting together something that could fit inside a VMR but used outside of the VMR was a simple task. Klar popped out of his VMR and fluttered over to their systems array. A glass container appeared around him before he could blink. The container appeared to be attached to nothing, but Klar quickly realized the iridescence in front of him could only be one thing. He shouted, "Hello, Salia," but was muted by the glass. Salia Slit's VMR popped back into view, removing her cloaking. "I can't hear a word you are saying, Klar." "That is you, isn't it? I'd remember those purple legs anywhere." "I have some bad news, old friend. I'm here to kill you." Salia plucked another wing from Klar's body as he let loose a tiny screech of pain. She had carefully pinned him down with tiny needles onto a piece of nearby wood through his hands and feet. She imagined it was extremely painful. She wondered how Emla felt before she died. The more she thought about it, the more she empathized. She could feel the bullet inside her. She could feel it tear through her organs and rip her apart. She wondered what Emla's last thought were. If she had thought of Salia in those last few moments when she was being torn to pieces. Then she remembered Klar, and wondered what he might think about it. "Please. Please don't kill me," Klar said. She plucked another wing from his body and he screamed another tiny scream in pain. "Let me tell you about my standard. I could care less how many Venians we lost. Losing 6 Venians means shit to me. I wouldn't have cared if we lost 600. The other 5 casualties combined mean less to me than the shit dribbling from your pathetic mewling mouth at this minute. We lost Emla. We lost her. That is my standard. If you think that any number of soldas makes up for that, you are wrong. I have no interest in stopping this war. Ever. There is no way to replace the unreplaceable. There will be no mercy. I am not interested in justice. I am not interested in fairness. I am not interested in making things even. I will destroy their planets, I will find their leaders, and I will eliminate their species. My standard is revenge. Complete and utter revenge. Permanency. I will do whatever it takes to make this happen, and not you, nor the Venian Engineering Council, nor any other entity will stand in my way. I built the VMR. It is my technology. I say how it gets used, not you, and not the VEC. Clar seized against the pins. If you are here for the mana array, then just take it. You can have all the mana nodes. Clar winced in pain. What you propose is genocide. Correct. That's what I said. If you think that you are insulting me or going to dissuade me with that comment, you are incorrect. I am proposing genocide. Openly and proudly. You will give me back my schematics, and then I will happily commit genocide in the name of the one that I lost. I will eliminate the Saldas indefinitely and forever, and then happily travel the galaxy finding any of them that weren't destroyed in my first effort and use them as my personal entertainment device for as long as they can withstand the torture I have extensively planned. Clar spat up tiny speckles of blood onto his thorax. You're a monster. Denia was a peaceful society for 10,000 years, and now you propose open war. Extinction. Aurelia said you'd gone mad. She'll find you. She'll kill you. Salia smiled, possibly. Possibly. Aurelia always was quite good. Maybe she gets the jump and she wins. Maybe not. The large metal door to the hallway clanked hard against its hinges. Salia slit smiled, speak of the devil. Just the lady we've been looking for if I had to guess. A VMR, bearing the emblem of Aurelia Smar, smashed the door open. Hi Salia. We've been looking for you too. Salia slammed her fist down and crushed Clar's tiny body, then set her thrusters to maximum and flew straight past her old friend. Aurelia was chasing her down the hallway at high speed. The tunnels through the base were tight, with 90-degree turns every 20 or so feet. It was identical to most other Venian forts, with the small exceptions that Aurelia's foray had made. Salia would blast at top acceleration towards a wall and then pivot and bounce off of it towards the next. She was searching for something, and this wasn't going to work. She needed time to look, and she couldn't do it with her old friend peppering her ass with 5mm rounds. It's not like they hadn't done this before. They'd done similar activities in training 1,000 times. Aurelia was one of the oldest and most successful pilots in the system. She was the only one Salia considered a peer in that regard. They twisted and turned through the tunnels at as high a speed as Salia could maintain. Aurelia continued to gain ground. It made Salia feel old and useless. She had the superior machine and she could barely outpace Aurelia anymore. She did have one advantage. Aurelia would want to capture her alive. Aurelia would try to minimize damage. Aurelia wouldn't put her comrades' lives at risk. Salia had no such issue. She dropped a cluster of munitions behind her as she made the next turn. There is no way Aurelia would be dumb enough to fly into them, but she was fairly sure it was enough firepower to bury everything behind her. Aurelia would live, but she'd take a while to make her way out of the wreckage. The explosion went off just as expected. Sarl had been out of his VMR, which made things that much easier. His tiny form was vaporized in the explosion. She flew down to where Sarl's body had been before the bomb went off and desperately searched for the box with the schematics. She did a quick 360-degree scan and found the box underneath a nearby corpse. She walked over to the corpse and flipped it over and grabbed the box. The corpse began to move around, so Salia pointed the gun on the right arm of her VMR in the body's direction, ready to finish the job, before she noticed something. "Oh, it's you." Boyd rolled over and saw Salia Slit standing over him. Life 38 of 132. You are temporarily deafened. You are bleeding internally and will lose 3 life per minute for the next 30 minutes. You have a fatal wound and need healing. Boyd mentally hit his mana tap function as fast as he could and bolted back up to full health. While he didn't have much use for mana yet, being able to tap his internal mana pool to restore his life was incredibly useful. Life 81 of 132. You are temporarily deafened. You are bleeding internally and will lose 1 life per minute for the next 30 minutes. Why are you here? Salia asked. I was delivering a box before something damn near blew me up, Boyd replied. Oh. That was me. I didn't realize you were there. I mean, I did, I knew something was there, I just didn't know it was you. Does that mean you wouldn't have done it if you knew I was there? Well, no, but I was just pointing it out. I didn't know you were there. You specifically. Either way, who gave you the box? Who is Aurelia? Wait, to whom were you supposed to deliver the box? The guy just said here. The Venian Enclave. Boyd smiled and ignored the question. What is it anyway? The thing in the box. It's mine. It doesn't matter. They took it from me. Boyd paused for a second. Why did you kill your own people though? Salia's VMR made a laughing noise. It's even worse than you might think, they're not just my people, they're my friends. Or were my friends. We aren't friends anymore. Obviously the dead ones aren't my friends. Even the non-dead ones aren't my friends either now though. Why did you just do that though? They took something from me, and I needed it back, and they didn't want to return it. In fact, they came here to get rid of it, which didn't work for me. So I got it back. Also, we should be going as I am guessing the Venians slipped a few extra through the protocols. We've been working on the technology before I left. I am assuming there are at least 2 more around here somewhere and they will definitely kill us both if they see us talking. Oh, where are you going? I am going with you. Glipglop is another friend of mine. Let's go see him. Boyd stared at her intently. You're going to kill him, aren't you? Of course not, I just told you we are old friends. Boyd stared at her again. Seriously? 'Cause I need a place to stay, and you just killed a bunch of people I thought were your friends. Salia's VMR laughed again. No, I just need to talk with him. Let's go. Salia hovered above Boyd as he took off at a run. You know that this place is full of ground dirt weevils, right? That's not nearly as innocuous as it sounds either. Yeah, I dealt with a few now. I just try to stomp in the middle of the swirly parts that does em in. Smart, Salia said. A few minutes later, a swell of ground boiled in front of Boyd. A projectile shot passed him into the ground and it quickly rumbled and then stopped. Boyd remained ready for a few seconds but quickly realized what happened. What was that? He asked. Smart bomb. Goes underground, lets out a seismic wave. The wave kills them by stopping neural function. It's one step better than stomping on them. Why let them come out of the ground at all? Boyd thought a minute and started running again. Hey, why didn't I get any experience when you killed those weevils? Fleein booted you. We aren't in a foray anymore. Oh right. They continued the trip back to the inn. Salia would occasionally send an explosive round into any weevil holes, and they made steady progress with few interruptions. You're becoming less useless now that you can run a bit, Salia offered. Thanks, I guess, Boyd said. They made great time all the way back to Cave's wall. Boyd's ability to run at near top speed was easily matched by Salia's VMR, and with his increased life and ability to mana tap his life back, Salia could occasionally grab him and carry him over random holes or other obstacles to expedite their journey. Salia was a ways out ahead of him, floating in the air as always when she moved. She suddenly burst to a stop and spun in the air and then fell to the ground. Hey, I need a favor. Sure, Boyd said happily. Salia tossed him a small red ball. I need you to hold this. What is it? Just hold it for now. Boyd walked into the bar. It was some sort of event night as rainbow-colored strobe lights were going all over the bar, which made it that much weirder than no one was dancing. The music didn't help. He was a bit nervous, but was hoping it didn't show. He really just wanted whatever his reward would be. Hey Glip Glop. I'm back. I delivered the box. The alien slits in his gray skin flared. Huh. Why haven't I heard from the Venians then yet? Don't lie to me, boy. Was just hoping I could get my reward? I wasn't sure if it was just access to the inn or if you had something more for me. Sure, you want a reward, I get that, but like I just said, if you actually did what you said you did, I would have heard. The Venians would have told me, they have means of doing that. I haven't heard shit. So why not? How do I know you didn't just throw it on the ground somewhere and come back here with your hand out? If you delivered the box, how come I haven't heard about it? His slits flared more extensively as he reached under the bar. Probably because I killed most of them. Salia slid emerged through the doors and started firing at him from a device on her arm. Most of the projectiles slowed considerably before reaching Glip Glop, but a few of them got through and hit him. A glob of blue blood flew from Glip Glop's shoulder before he flipped and ducked behind the bar. Boyd heard. A random smattering of noises immediately started and assumed this was bad news. Patrons rapidly began fleeing the scene and covering their heads as they ran. The house music banged harder and harder. He was going to give me a reward though. Boyd yelled. God damn it, you said you wouldn't kill him. Quick lesson for you, boy, all Venians lie all the time. Glip Glop emerged from underneath the bar, covered in a suit of metal. Bits and pieces of metal flew towards him from all across the bar. He was steadily increasing in mass, having grown from a small grayish alien-like creature to a large chunk of metal. He sprung from behind the bar and swatted Boyd out of the way. Metal shards kept flying towards him. The remaining patrons in the bar cut to ribbons as the metal continued to fly into the larger mass. The deep, thumping bass continued to play. Life 24-111. Bits and pieces of the metal had formed into a massive axe, which he now swung at Salia. It hit the VMR in the side, but didn't pierce her armor. It did send her flying against the wall, but she bounced off it and fired into the air, firing strings of projectiles at Glip Glop. Similar to his axe attack, it seemed to do little damage and in fact, many of the projectiles just ended up as a part of the larger mass. Glip Glop smiled and swung his larger and larger axe at Salia. It stuck in a patron's table where he was trying to extract it. Salia took this moment to bring her sword out and try to slice Glip Glop's hand off, but the sword stuck to his metal bits. Salia pulled as hard as she could, but the sword was stuck. You think I wasn't prepared for you, Venian? Glip Glop laughed before he leveled Salia with a fist. He slammed his fist into her again on the floor and smashed her into the ground. Salia's much more slight frame suddenly magnetically hooked to Glip Glop. Bits of metal still flew into them, slowly encasing Salia in metal with Glip Glop's frame. Boyd couldn't see her life bar anymore since they were no longer in the same foray, but he was sure that Glip Glop was doing some damage, and he was positive that if she was fully encased it was going to be fatal. Boyd stood up with the intention of helping, but he had no idea what to do. He couldn't damage the growing iron mass with his bare fists, and if he got closer he would almost certainly die if Salia couldn't defeat this thing. A shard of metal flew past his head and cut his cheek as it integrated into the larger mass of Glip Glop. Boyd raised his hand to his cheek and felt the blood dripping down his cheek. He had forgotten he was still holding the red ball Salia had given him, but upon hearing her scream, he threw it at the iron mass of Glip Glop. The ball flew towards Glip Glop, urged on by the magnetic field, and lodged in the chunks of metal flying towards him. Almost instantly, the mass of iron surrounding Glip Glop fell apart entirely. Salia fell to the ground in the mass of metal. Glip Glop, unsure about what was happening, looked around with confusion. Boyd saw an opening and charged towards him, hoping to help Salia. It was for naught though, as Salia's sword exploded through the top of Glip Glop's head. She pulled her sword out of his head and wiped the blood on his shirt. She powered quickly over to Boyd and shoved him in the chest. When I hand you something and tell you to hold it, what does that mean? I thought you wanted me to hold it. Right, but we've done this before. Hold, this means I am going to use it to kill someone, so why did you keep holding it and not throw it at him? You said you weren't going to kill him. Why on Venia would you think that was true? Because you said it. Well, obviously I was going to kill him. I'm always going to kill him. Damn it. I just wanted to finish my quest. Sorry. I thought you knew what was happening. God damn, I forgot how dumb you are. Salia rifled through Glipglop's belongings as she mumbled to herself. It was a lot of commentary about who had given Glipglop the tech and how she might be able to use it. Boyd was going to interrupt, but she didn't seem like she was in a very good mood. Salia then jumped over the bar and grabbed a few things from behind it and shoved them into her pack. Good news, I got what I wanted. So we're good here. Thanks for your help, and next time, if I hand you something, it's for killing people, not for holding. Doesn't seem likely we have a next time, but all the same. Well, I guess that's it. Thanks again. Salia waved as her jet boosters powered on. Boyd stared at the metal bird-like creature in front of him. She has basically been dressing him down. It felt like a lecture from his father. He wasn't sure how to respond. Got any advice on what I should be doing then? You killed them all. No, I killed some of them. I will kill the rest of them later. Fair enough. Either way, my point is nothing is as it seems, and the one way to make absolutely sure that you don't leave this place alive is to assume that anyone is going to help you. This probably sounds a bit cynical, but it's the only honest advice you are ever going to get in here. Figure out what you want and then make that happen through any means necessary. It won't be long before this place is total chaos, just like always. You better figure out how you are going to navigate that, and fast, before you end up with Jellybean eating your entrails. He's told me on several occasions he still wants to do that, so I would probably avoid him. Boyd scratched his shaggy hair. Okay. Wow. A real poet. Boyd waved. By forever, I guess then? Yeah. By forever. She waved as she blasted into the distance. She turned back to smile and wave as she disappeared in the distance. She then stopped, turned around and came back. Oh yeah, you're half of things. She flew directly up to Boyd and slapped him in the face. His eye started burning intensely and his knees buckled. I was going to keep that and try and reverse engineer it to fit my kit. You need it worse than I do though. It'll either kill you or optimize with your mana cores pretty quick. You aren't going to make it without it. Hey, if you don't die, go have a scan of old Mr. Glipglop. Might change your opinion about some things. Consider it a free lesson on survival in Zenith. Best of luck. Bye. Boyd felt his face tearing apart. There was a tiny metallic spider burrowing into his skull. He mentally checked his life, but it wasn't really receding at all. This was completely confusing, as it felt like someone had stabbed him in the face. He tore at the mechanical device, but it was firmly entrenched in his eye. No matter how hard he pulled, the pain continued and the machine wouldn't detack. His knees buckled and he started vomiting. Then he opened his eyes. Congratulations, you have been given prototype technology from the excellent engineering team at Venia Incorporated. If you have received this item in error, please return it as soon as possible. All items are tracked and will be returned through force if needed. If you are receiving this item in earnest, then, congratulations on your new purchase and prepare for the utmost in Venian technology. User identification initiated. User, please identify. He mentally thought Boyd Bridges, but said nothing. User Boyd Bridges is not identified. Is this a new user? He thought, yes. Hello, Boyd Bridges. You have equipped a Mark IV V.2102933 ocular/neural integrator. This core is powered by mana. Please wait while the system optimizes. Optimizing. 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 Optimization complete. Your O/N integrator is now fully operational. This model contains all of our prior upgrades, but in addition, has a new deep scanning TM feature. Deep scan TM for when you need to know whether they like it or not. Would you like to know more? Boyd was in a bit of a panic. His vision had returned largely to what he remembered it was before he lost his eye, but it was information overload. His brain could barely process his vision. He had full depth of vision, but on top of that, there were little bits and pieces of information attached to everything. Rocks weren't just rocks, he could focus on them and see their exact composition. Plants were all named, not that he had ever seen any of the names before. He had an entire menu option for changing light sources and viewing heat signatures instead of light. He had functional control over his focus out to distances he couldn't possibly imagine being able to see prior. There was an entire aim assist function that he assumed would come in handy if he was ever allowed to use a gun again. He couldn't focus though, too much information was pouring through the device. Every time he opened his eyes, they started to burn. System detecting interference between O/N integration. Reoptimizing for extremely low intelligence life forms. Optimizing. Optimizing. Reoptimization complete. Boyd opened his eyes, and the amount of input was reduced. He could tell the options were still available, but the total level of sensory input was turned way down. This was far more palpable. While previously he could concentrate on things and get information from them from Zenith's scan system, his ability was now vastly improved. His vision was fully corrected well beyond any normal human capacity, including built-in telescopy out to 80x magnification. It was like having a pair of binoculars over one eye, so he was forced to close his opposite eye whenever he initiated the feature. He spent a few minutes blinking back and forth and getting used to the system. Hello Boyd Bridges. System now stable. Would you like to learn about deep scan technology? Boyd thought about it and mentally clicked yes. Deep scan technology is a new Venian technology that bypasses traditional limitations on scanning. Zenith-based scans are limited by both two-way consent and a limited level of information. Deep scan technology bypasses this issue by outlaying a complete character sheet in a form where either party can give consent to a scan. Mana usage is dependent on power differentials and depth of scan. Boyd thought about the implications of either party giving consent to a scan and realized it basically amounted to you can scan things even if they didn't want you to scan them. He could see how that would be incredibly useful. It felt invasive though? It wasn't something that he was entirely comfortable with at a broader scale, but realized this place was the hardly right venue for moral equivocating and decided that he would at least investigate its usefulness. He slowly began scanning random things around the town. Deep scan offered a lot of advantages. He could tell uses for plants and could identify the composition of things. He didn't feel comfortable using deep scan on any NPCs yet, but he could tell it would be extremely useful. He finally remembered there was one NPC he needed to scan and ran back to the bar. He scanned Glipglop's corpse laying on the floor. He had no idea how things got cleaned up, but it was pretty clear that it wasn't a super efficient process. The bar was basically still functioning, with the bartender laying dead on the ground, bleeding on the floor. Part of the focus was on cleaning, but many of the patrons were still actively being served. It wouldn't have passed code in Oklahoma, but this wasn't Oklahoma. System, Glipglop corpse. It's the dead body of Glipglop. You literally watched this happen. You helped kill him even. How is this worth your time? Deep scan, would you like to deep scan this corpse? 1 mana/second base. Boyd mentally thought yes. His vision skewed when he looked at the corpse and he immediately started feeling additional information pump into him. At the same time, he could feel the mana draining from his body. The harder he focused, the more mana he lost and the more information came in. Deep scan, Glipglop corpse. Active race unknown, Zenith-based. Actual race Doppler. Class Saldesian operative. Alliance Saldes. Rank 167. Foray none. Combatant status, non-combatant interloper. Cause of death, decapitation, /sword in the face. Issuant of death, Salia Slit, Venian mechanized ranger, disavowed. More information came piling in, but the strain on his mana was rough. He couldn't effectively keep deep scanning for very long before he'd lose concentration and have to refocus and start over. He was hoping this had skill ranks like Mana Tap, or it would take a lot more mana before he could use it in combat effectively. Even still, he understood why Salia asked him to scan Glipglop. He wasn't sure what the information meant, but his best guesses were that 1, he was a Salda's guy that Salia hated, and 2, she was trying to show him that not everyone was what they seemed. He'd already picked up on that, but the object lesson didn't hurt. Will you be staying the night with us tonight then? Boyd nearly jumped out of his increasingly destroyed jeans. A waitress walked up to Boyd and smiled. Mr. Bridges, will you be staying the night with us? My understanding is that you had open access to the rooms and the bar. Boyd almost corrected her, but thought better of it. Glipglop did say that. Yes. That is correct. And I will. Thank you. Boyd was then going to note that Glipglop was a rotting corpse, but quickly admonished himself. This place was weird, but you had to roll with it, and a room was a room. He marched upstairs and into a fairly lavish suite. It even had a bathtub, which he promptly started and then fell asleep inside in a state of utter relaxation. Boyd was laying in bed when the door to his room burst open. He stood to try and defend himself, only to find Jellybean Jenkins was the one who had entered his room. Human. Salia Slit has alerted me to your location. We will immediately commence our prior sleeping arrangement. I have received poor quality sleep since you were ousted from our foray. While I am surprised and disappointed to see you are alive, I look forward to our nap together. Jellybean Jenkins ripped the blankets off Boyd and laid on the bottom of the bed before placing the blankets on himself. Our foray will proceed to level 20 tomorrow, so this will be the last of our co-sleeping arrangement. You will miss my presence when I have left to gain greater fortune. It is done. You didn't even ask, man. You can't just come jump in my bed. I can't sleep like this. I'm like 3 feet in the air. Jellybean Jenkins ignored him. He rolled over onto his back and began kicking in the air while yipping and growling alternately. He was soundly asleep. Midway through the night, with his arm hooked around the top of the bed, Boyd couldn't sleep. He had tried to take some of the blankets back, but Jellybean snapped at him when he did, so Boyd gave up on it. Making matters worse, Jellybean not only yipped and rolled around, he also farted, belched, and snored. Realizing Jellybean Jenkins was asleep gave him an idea though. While he couldn't very well risk trying out his new gizmo on an awake wolflord, an asleep one might be a viable option. He carefully began his deep scan while keeping an eye on Jellybean himself. System, deep scan activated. Jellybean Jenkins, rank 2896, Wolflord of the Seven Plains. Boyd continued to scan him as he could throughout the night. He didn't make any additional ranks, but he found the whole exercise very useful.